Interestingly enough, we bring you this live shot here. We know the former president has called for protests in a peaceful manner. Many Republicans push back on that, but interestingly enough, it's the opposite side that's outside protesting now, saying insurrection, TikTok, time's up. No one is above the law. Trump is guilty. Again, many supporting the possible indictment of former President Trump there. Again,
those signs really look like they were made by the grassroots groups too, don't they, Sean?
Yeah, we'll continue to follow that. Again, barricades have been put up.
As if the impending indictment wasn't enough, Donald Trump issued his big call to arms for his supporters, his one last-ditch effort to try and show the world that the people are on his side. And what he ended up with is a crowd calling for him to go to prison. 10 out of 10 wouldn't change a thing. Now, Trump at first issued his call for protest on Truth Social, writing stuff like, the far and away leading Republican candidate and former president of the United States of America will be arrested on Tuesday of next week. Protest, take our nation back. And we must save America, protest, protest, protest. He even appealed to the New York Police Department to defer to him over the very laws they're sworn to uphold, writing, can you imagine the great New York City Police Department, correctly referred to as New York City's finest, who for the first and only time in history endorsed a president, me, and honored me as Man of the Year, having to defend and protect the defunders and cop haters of the radical left that want to put their greatest champion and friend in prison for a crime that doesn't exist. All the while, the Soros-backed DA allows murderers and other violent criminals to freely roam the sidewalks of New York, because nothing says law and order quite like trying to get law enforcement to not enforce the law and enforce you instead. And of course, all of this is reminiscent of Trump's message preceding the January 6th insurrection, wherein he wrote, big protest in D.C. on January 6th, be there, will be wild. And we all know how violent January 6th turned, and so by issuing the same call to action, the very obvious point of this by Trump was to have a repeat of January 6th in New York on Tuesday. Except this time, it looks like Trump's supporters managed to internalize some lessons from the insurrection, namely that getting duped and getting charged and imprisoned because of Donald Trump's need for some warm-blooded bodies to feed his ego isn't exactly a two-sided exchange. But as far as Trump is concerned, I just gotta say, it really is incredible that the guy who swore an oath to defend this country cannot stop inciting domestic terrorism within it. And to do so while currently under investigation by federal prosecutors for doing the exact same thing. There is a special counsel investigation happening right now regarding him inciting an insurrection on January 6th. Think about it. Trump called for his supporters to come to D.C. for a protest on January 6th, and presumably his defense is going to be that he never intended for there to be any violence. But obviously there was violence, and so now he knows that when he summons his supporters with his call to arms, violence follows. And yet, by doing it again in New York, he showed that A, he knows that there will be violence and he doesn't care, and B, that the threat of violence has never been a factor in his decision-making, meaning of course he incited the violence on January 6th. It hurts him now in New York, and it hurts him as far as the federal prosecutors are concerned by undermining his own defense in the January 6th case. Because for the umpteenth time, no one does more damage to Donald Trump than Donald Trump. Now, if only Trump's Republican colleagues had the same sense that everyone else had by not following Trump off the plank. And yet, shockingly, that's not the case. Here are those Republicans, starting with the guy who Trump's last mob tried to hang.
The idea of indicting a former president of the United States is deeply troubling to me, as it is to tens of millions of Americans, and particularly happening in what appears to be a politically charged environment in New York, where the Attorney General and other elected officials literally campaigned on a pledge to prosecute the former president.
And if they indict President Trump on fake charges to go after him to try to stop the movement that they cannot stop, he is going to win 2024 in a landslide victory, and then we'll put him in the White House and he will finish what he started. We will gut the government of all the traitors that are serving the globalists in America last.
We don't want to have a system of justice in our country that is politically motivated. And if you're going to go pull out the payments to Stormy Daniels through Michael Cohen, and then now say that there's some hidden felony nobody knows about, and you're trying to raise the stakes to bring that in, yeah, Congress should look at that, because we don't want an unequal application of the law. We don't want a law basically to just point at one person. That's not our system of justice in America. That is, I believe, under congressional purview. And Chairmans Jordan and Comer expressly stated that in their letter that they released yesterday.
I think the thing that you may misinterpret when President Trump talks, when someone says that they can protest, he would probably be referring to my tweet, educate people about what's going on. He's not talking in a harmful way.
Yeah, Kevin McCarthy's like, you see, when Donald Trump called for the blood of his enemies to fill the streets, he didn't mean it literally, he meant it more from an educational sense. I have seen Olympic gymnasts unable to contort themselves as much as Kevin McCarthy just did. And in a way, it's almost inconceivable how these Republicans are willing to go out on a limb for Trump, considering the guy has cost them every election since he's led that party. In 2018, Trump's presidency led to the biggest midterm performance for House Democrats in modern U.S. history. In 2020, Trump himself became one of just a handful of presidents to manage to lose re-election. And in 2022, a year that history said should be a wave election for Republicans, not only did Republicans fail to take back the Senate and eke out a House win only by one of the narrowest majorities ever, but literally all of Trump's endorsed Secretary of State and gubernatorial candidates in swing states lost. Even when other Republicans won, it was Trump's candidates who underperformed. You could not ask for clearer proof of the extent to which Donald Trump is an albatross around Republicans' necks. Which begs the question, what do Republicans have to gain by keeping him around? And the answer here is obvious, because while their party has nothing to gain, and in fact plenty to lose, the politicians themselves are too cowardly to speak a single ill word of him in public because they know they'll be primaried by someone propped up by Trump. And so because they want to keep their own jobs, they are perfectly content to let their party burn. And that right there is what happens when your party is composed of a bunch of power-hungry narcissists who are more concerned with their own paycheck than the movement they purport to represent. And if one thing is clear, knowing the Republicans, nothing is changing anytime soon. And hopefully even Republican voters will begin to recognize that their elected officials aren't there to serve their voters, they're there to serve themselves. And if that means they have to coddle Donald Trump, the guy who is almost unilaterally demolishing the GOP in election after election after election, well, that's very clearly what they're willing to do. Hopefully those Republican voters recognize that that's a recurring theme on the right, that their politicians will serve up grievance politics and fear porn and victimization, but at the end of the day, that doesn't actually help anyone. That doesn't bring down the cost of prescription drugs. It doesn't protect the environment. It doesn't defend Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid. It doesn't give veterans health care. It doesn't upgrade our infrastructure. It doesn't bring manufacturing jobs back home. You know what did all of that? Democrats when they had the majority. So voters have a choice. You can either elect people who pass popular legislation, or you can elect people who will slavishly bend to the every whim of a cult leader. Take all the time you need with that one. Before you go, a quick announcement. I've started a Spanish YouTube channel. Democrats desperately need to be able to appeal to Spanish-speaking audiences, so this is me doing my part. To help that channel get going in the algorithm so that we can finally start spreading our progressive message and breaking the conservative stranglehold on Spanish-speaking media, please subscribe and watch a few videos. The link to that channel, called Brian Tyler Cohen Espanol, is right here on this screen. And of course, to see more of my content in English, make sure to subscribe to this channel as well. The link is also right here on this screen. Thanks so much for watching.